Here's one more video for Thursday covering court structure, authority, and reporters. You need to be aware of court structure. When you're researching case law, you're looking at opinions of appellate and higher courts. Trial courts are where the factual disputes are resolved, and many cases will stop here. The decision of a trial court is not case law. When a trial court decision is appealed, it is heard by an appellate court. Case law happens in appellate courts. These are the decisions you're looking at when you're researching case law. Finally, if someone is unhappy with the decision of an appellate court, they can request that their case be heard by the Supreme Court. Again, decisions of the Supreme Courts are case law. This structure applies to both state and federal court systems. So I have case law at the appellate level starred because there are some things to consider when looking at these decisions. First, has this case been appealed, and if so, how did the higher court rule? A higher court can either affirm or agree with the lower court's decision, or it can overturn the lower court's decision. For example, the U.S. Supreme Court can overturn a decision of the U.S. Court of Appeals. So from the bottom of the diagram, then, a factual dispute is decided in trial court. The losing party files an appeal in an intermediate appellate court, and the opinion of the appellate court becomes case law if that opinion is published and if there is no further appeal. If there is further appeal, the decision of the higher court becomes case law. So what do we mean by published? This can get confusing because we all know what the word published means, and it's reasonable to assume unpublished must mean the opposite, but when we're talking about case law, we mean something specific when we say an opinion is published or unpublished. Published opinions are those found in print reporters, which is simple enough. A better word for unpublished opinions would be non-precedential opinions. And these are opinions that are not designated by the court to be printed in a print reporter. So non-precedential decisions at the federal level can be found in the Federal Appendix, which is published by West. At the state level, you can find them by contacting the court clerk, and you can often find them online. Non-precedential opinions are not treated as binding precedent, and you should always consult court rules before citing an unpublished or non-precedential opinion. So case law matters because of the concept of precedent. Courts look to other courts' interpretations of the law when making decisions. Once a court decides a factual dispute, other courts should follow the same ruling when presented with the same facts. However, whether or not a court must follow the ruling of another court depends on authority and jurisdiction. Case law is primary authority. Whether or not it is mandatory or persuasive authority will depend on the level of the court and the jurisdiction. Within a single jurisdiction, the highest court is mandatory authority for all lower courts in the same jurisdiction. The United States Supreme Court is mandatory authority for all courts in the United States. Knowing which jurisdiction you are dealing with will save you some research time. First, it'll help you determine if the case you found is mandatory or persuasive authority. And second, you need to know where to find the information you need. And limiting a search by jurisdiction will help you save time. West publishes the National Reporter System, which covers appellate courts for all states and the District of Columbia and the federal courts. They also publish specialized reporters for federal courts, such as the Federal Rules Decisions and the Federal Appendix. So look at the chart on page 95 of the Sloan textbook, and that gives a list of where you can find decisions by court or jurisdiction. It gives you the name and abbreviation of each reporter listed. And this map on this slide shows how West has broken up their regional reporters for state cases. Arkansas opinions are in the Southwestern Reporter, along with Texas, Missouri, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can easily search by jurisdiction in Westlaw. If you select cases from the home page, you'll land on a page that looks like this. You can limit by court, circuit, or state. So for this example, I selected Arkansas. Now I can either enter search terms in the search box at the top, or I can limit further by court. So I selected Arkansas Court of Appeals, and West is showing me the 10 most recent documents. Again, I can search from here, or I can just browse this list. So I'm looking at entry number 1 that I have in the inset in the black outline box there, and I see the name of the case, Lewis versus State. Beneath that, it tells me which court, the date, citations, and it gives a brief extract. The citation I have circled, SW 3rd, refers to West Southwestern Reporter, which is where the Arkansas cases will appear. So going farther down the list to result number 6, Rector versus Health South. This one, for whatever reason, is not going to be reported in the West Southwestern Reporter. And this is the text of that case in Westlaw, and I circled the notice referring you to Revised Supreme Court Rule 5.2. So you need to watch out for details like this when you're doing your research, because it will save you some time and keep you from going in a completely wrong direction. Now, if you come across a case that isn't printed in a regional reporter and you've checked the court rules and you still find that this case will be useful to your research, you can find it by its official citation. So on this screen cap, that's going to be at the top of the image, 2014 ARC App 135. So case law is a primary source of law. It's based on the concept of precedent, and understanding which cases will help you with your research problem depends on understanding court structure, jurisdictions, and whether or not an opinion is mandatory or persuasive authority. When researching cases, be aware of details like whether a case is published or unpublished, what jurisdiction you're dealing with, and which court wrote the decision. So familiarize yourself with print sources and be aware of how they are arranged. And I've been focusing on West and Lexis online publications so far, and for Monday's class we'll look at some other online sources.